buy my chicken fried, and cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio.
So this is the food video that I was planning on doing before Thanksgiving because I thought it might be inspirational to people, but then Thanksgiving came along and I got busy because in my house I seem to be the one that makes the holidays happen and put it together. If I don't do it, then kind of the rest of the family is just like, we'll do whatever. So I'm the one that does the decorating and the cooking and bringing everybody together and making it happen. So I was busy myself, but I figure now we are in between holidays and I can still talk about it. I just have a couple for this one, and I guess I'll start with Fannie's Last Supper. This is by Chris Kimball, host of America's Test Kitchen. I don't know if I've ever seen an episode of America's Test Kitchen, but I think I don't even know if it's still on the air, but I do know that it is or was a program on PBS, I believe. And this is Chris's memoir of when he purchased a 1859 townhouse or row house in Boston. Doing that, he became inspired to learn the era. He admits he already had a fascination with the Victorian era, but really living in this house really brought it to the front of his mind, and he really wanted to learn how these people ate and what the neighborhood was like at that time. And he was sort of propelled on into this project with finding a 1896 Fannie Farmer cookbook, and in the back of the cookbook they had I think it was a 12-course Christmas dinner menu or layout. So him and his test kitchen director and all these guys all got together and decided they were going to turn Chris Campbell's kitchen into an era-appropriate kitchen to pull off this Christmas dinner that Fannie Farmer had laid out in 1896. If you're not familiar with Fannie Farmer, she was the second director of the Boston Cooking School. Originally, the Boston Cooking School started out as a women's education association, I think it was called. And it was this thing they put together years after the Civil War had ended and families were still struggling to kind of financially get back on their feet. They brought together all these women that came from low-income means or low-income families and brought them to this school they put together where women could learn skills that could be marketable, that could get them into good jobs, that could help support their families better. A large part of it were these cooking classes, but it wasn't just cooking. They also taught them chemistry, and they taught them anatomy, so they knew exactly what was going on when somebody actually ate food, which I haven't been to cooking school, so I don't know if they still do that, but the thought of them going that far was insane and really impressive to me. They would take it to that length. And not only that, but they also taught them what they called sickbed culinary skills, or sickbed cookery, I think they called it, where you I'm guessing that's where you learn how to cook for hospital patients who are on specific diets. I mean, it was some impressive skills they offered these women. It wasn't just, oh, you get to be a scullery maid. So they started this school, and the Boston Cooking School was just sort of a department within the Women's Education Association. But I think 1894, Boston Cooking School decided they were going to be their own separate building. The first director was Mary Lincoln, but not President Lincoln's wife. This was Mrs. David Lincoln, I think. And she was director number one, and then down the road, Fannie Farmer was brought in as the second director to come in and take over for Mary Lincoln. But after just like a year or so, I think, Fannie Farmer came in and said, you know what, I'm gonna start my own school. I got this. And she runs off, starts her own school that ends up putting Boston Cooking School out of business. And the funny thing was Fannie Farmer herself admitted she wasn't even that specialized as a cook. I mean, she did all right in the kitchen. It was more like she could sell herself well, and she knew how to market herself and her idea for business, but it wasn't that, you know, she was any like Gordon Ramsay, the chef, in the kitchen. I mean, it's not like she didn't know how to do anything, but it was largely marketing and her personality. And when I was reading this, it kind of seemed like there was some sort of almost like Tesla-Edison feud that, or rivalry that continued on between Mary Lincoln and Fannie Farmer. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that was the impression I got. But even if Fannie wasn't the most impressive chef, they said largely what sold her is the fact that she was really likable, energetic, clearly intelligent. She had a real passion for people learning how to improve their diets. Well, at least that's what she said. But the funny thing was, when they went back into her recipes in this book and actually tried to recreate them, they said the majority of them were all heavy on sauces, and all the food was cooked too long and just to death. And so I don't know, that seemed like sort of a contradiction to me. But I mean, the project that Chris Kimball talks about in this book, just the project is interesting, but I actually really liked that he included a lot of Boston history and Victoriana history that I didn't know. This thing, if you go on Goodreads, this thing has a lot of crappy reviews and a lot of people complaining about the fact that he went on and on about Boston history and all that, but I actually liked that part. I learned a lot of history that I didn't know about that I actually found really fascinating. So there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of just general food history that I didn't know. He talks about how standard measuring sizes weren't introduced till the late 1800s, which I cook so much now, I didn't even think about when those might have come into effect. I just assume they're there. He said before the standard measuring systems came in, people were just saying, oh, use a teacup, but it was like the actual teacup. Or he mentions in here, they had these strange words, like they would say a gill, which is 5 ounces, or the same size as a teacup. They'd say a dessert spoon, which ends up measuring out to half a tablespoon. Or they use breakfast cup, which now we know comes out to about half a pint. But can you imagine not having any clue about that and trying to cook a recipe now? I mean, that would be such a headache. So he talks about that. He also describes some just common terms we have in our just sort of lingo that we use every day, and where some of that comes from, and it actually originates from the kitchen. When somebody says, oh, they're giving me the cold shoulder, he said, the phrase to give the cold shoulder originated in a practice once common in France as well as during the Norman rule in Brittany. When a guest had outstayed his welcome, he was not served the expected warm haunch of venison. Instead, a dinner of a cold shoulder of mutton was placed before him as a sign that it was time to leave. I thought that was pretty damn funny. It's like, no, it's fine, you can stay. Like, not really though, you need to go. That was great. He also says, one thing I learned was I didn't realize that baking powder was actually a combination of baking soda and cream of tartar, which, news to me. But it makes sense though, because, you know, it's common to use baking soda as a cleaning product. There have been times when I've run out of baking soda and just, I was like, well, what the hell? I have baking powder. I'll use baking powder. And I've read that cream of tartar can be used as a stain remover. And so, you know, using baking powder apparently is using a powerhouse of baking soda and cream of tartar. So that was kind of cool. If you're coffee drinkers, he goes into a brief coffee history. I like that he mentioned, talks about this coffee roaster that was invented by this guy named Jabez Burns, which he just sounds like he should be a jazz player or something. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's just all kinds of interesting stuff in here. There are tips on how to make natural plant-based food colorings, Or if you're more brave, he also explains how to make gelatin from calves' feet, which was a common practice back in the day. I will say though that this is not going to be an easy read for vegans or vegetarians, because some of the stuff, I'm not a huge red meat eater, but I do eat a fair amount of white meat and fish, and even I was cringing at some of the things he talks about in here. He does talk about making mock turtle soup, which involves boiling a calf's head, and learning the hard way that you have to take the brains out before you do that. He also mentioned it's good to clean the calf nostrils with a wire brush before doing so. It's like, yeah, that's probably a good tip. Some of the things he talks about, when he talks about like lists of things, that he likes listing things that were available in certain areas during certain time periods, and some of those lists did get a little Bubba Gump for me.
Shrimp is the fruit of the sea. You can barbecue it, boil it, broil it, bake it, saute it. There's shrimp kebabs, shrimp creole, shrimp gumbo, pan fried, deep fried, stir fried. There's pineapple shrimp, lemon shrimp, coconut shrimp, pepper shrimp, shrimp soup, shrimp stew, shrimp salad, shrimp and potatoes, shrimp burger, shrimp sandwich. That's about it.
That's fine. You know, what I did is, if you don't want to read all those lists, you can speed read those, scan over them. One thing I thought was pretty cool is he includes the recipes they used at this dinner, but he gives you the fixed versions of, they figured out what didn't work in Fannie's version, or what is really bland and wouldn't appeal to people today, and they tweaked it a little bit so that it would make sense in today's kitchen. So in this book he gives you the updated version so you can make it at home if you want. A lot of them I thought they sounded interesting. They're probably not going to be anything I'm going to make in my kitchen anytime soon, but there's some stuff, like he said there was a chicken with a crispy flour coating, which also works for turkeys. There's a recipe for classic Boston baked beans. The beans, not the candy. There's a baked toasted coconut vanilla custard. He teaches you how to make homemade tapioca, Victorian sponge cake, orange snow, lemon jelly. There's a recipe for a Canton sherbet, which is made from the type of, he said you use the type of ginger you usually find on your sushi plate. You can actually make a sherbet out of that. There's a French cream cake, which sounds amazing, but he says you have to beat the egg whites for like 5 minutes straight, and then the filling that goes in the cake is so sensitive, the cake has to sit for 24 hours before you can even touch it, which is a little volatile for me, for my kitchen, but it sounds amazing. I think my favorite was the Mandarin Cake that he mentions in here. Let's see that. That one up in the corner there. That's a Mandarin Cake, which just looks gorgeous. The downside of this is he said to make one of these it's like 2 days setup. So if I had spent 2 days putting one dish together, I would be really hesitant to have anybody touch it. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. One thing I did find kind of curious though is they mention that H.L. Mencken reviewed a 1930 edition of her cookbook and commented that it represented middle-class British notions of cookery, and he deplored Fannie Farmer's recipe for soft-shelled crabs as an obscenity almost beyond belief. Well, that kind of struck my interest because I actually have an edition of the 1930 Fannie Farmer cookbook. So I don't have the 1896 edition he's talking about, but this is a 1930 reprint of Fannie Farmer's cookbook, or as you can see, Boston Cooking School. This was actually published after Fannie Farmer's death, so it was basically just reprints of what she had before, but I looked up the soft-shelled crab, and all it says is clean crabs, sprinkle with salt, pepper, dip in crumbs, eggs, and crumbs. oh, I guess they're talking about layers. Dip in crumbs, egg and crumbs, and fry in deep fat and drain. Serve with tartar sauce. That's basically all it says. So I'm not sure what the obscenity of that is, but who knows? So yeah, if you like Victoriana, if you like food history, if you're curious about the Boston area, if you're from that area, any of those things, you should check out that book. It's a good time. It's a lot of fun if you're into those things. If not, then you might be bored silly. So the second book I had for this food video was NetGalley sent me an e-copy of the Tucci Table, the cookbook by actor Stanley Tucci. And so I checked that out. And I think this was the first cookbook I've ever read that actually made me laugh out loud. His sense of humor is really funny, even when he's talking about cooking. Like, for example, there is one recipe where he mentions using the sunchokes, but he said the downside of sunchokes is it's common to give the person gas once they've eaten them. And so he said this recipe is best for, or be sure to eat this with people you love, or better yet, people who love you. That was really cool. And I thought it was really sweet that he included his whole family. He talks about his kids' favorite recipes, and I liked the fact that he included recipes from both his current wife Felicity and his late wife Nancy, and gives props and love to both of them, which I thought was really sweet. The thing that really impressed me the most about it, though, was it's one of the first cookbooks I've actually seen in a while that is not talking over the head of their readers. He's not giving you anything that you're not generally going to have in your house. He makes a lot of the stuff you eat generally, and he just shows you how to make it yourself, like pastas and meat dishes and things like that. There are a lot of meat dishes in this book, so again, vegetarians, vegans, it's going to be kind of a tough read for you, but there are a few. He mentions there's a recipe for a vegetable parmigiana and cauliflower steaks, which there's no meat involved, they're just called steaks because they're cut long ways, that look really good. And he also tells you how to make french fries out of polenta, which I thought was interesting. So there are some things for the vegetarians. It's just not going to be a lot to choose from because a lot of the recipes are pretty meat heavy. But it was cool to see a mix between his Italian background and his wife's British background. If you don't know, he's married to actress Emily Blunt's sister, Felicity. And so there's a mix of a lot of well-known Italian dishes and a lot of traditional English dishes. But there's a lot of recipes like fish and chips, English roast, Yorkshire pudding, beef Wellington, all that kind of stuff. If you're curious just about the celebrity aspect, he does include some recipes from other celebrities. Like he mentions Emily Blunt's chicken noodle soup, and he has Tony Shalhoub's stuffed grape leaves, and he has a recipe for a flatbread that comes from a recipe that was Natasha Richardson's. So there's a lot of cool stuff in there. I still thought it was funny that he brings up the recipe for fried green tomatoes, which he said he learned while he was in Atlanta filming the Hunger Games. Look, irony. So yeah, that was cute. Oh yeah, it was a lot of cool stuff, a lot of easy recipes to follow. The directions themselves aren't super complicated. If there's a special tool you need, they tell you, but it's not anything crazy. It's like, I think there's one recipe that says you have to have an ice cream maker, but like a tabletop one. So you don't have to have special gear in your house. I think the most fancy tool they use is maybe like a pasta roller. But they're all really easy to follow, and the photographs in this book are really amazing. I read it on my Kindle, and the picture placement was a little bit off, so it'll probably look way better as a hardback. But if you're looking for a really cool like gift cookbook for the chefs in your family, this would be a good one. This one's a lot of fun, and I will show you some pictures right here. Okay guys, so as you may have seen from my November wrap-up video, I figured out that if I'm going to film photos from my Kindle, I need to use this other camera so it shows up. Otherwise there's too much glare and you can't see what I'm talking about. So, back on the other camera, I just wanted to show you a few of the images from Tucci Table, just so you can see that they're really simple, really rustic, but really amazing colors and just very enticing overall. So here we have the roasted potato salad, and I just like all the colors on that. I mean, that would look amazing for Christmas dinner. Then there's steak with oregano, thyme, and rosemary. That just looks like a really awesome stew almost. So yeah, thinking date night maybe? That'd be a good one, guys. Or ladies, if you want to impress your man. And then the other one was just this really cool rustic photo of a written out family recipe, which I thought was a really nice touch. Just to bring it back to family. Okay guys, so that's it. All I had for the cooking video. Originally I wanted to also include the 100-foot journey, but I still haven't gotten to this one yet. So I figured what I'd do is I'd make a part 2 cooking video to this, and in that one I'll talk about 100-foot journey, and I also have My Life in France by Julia Child. So yeah, that's gonna be a while down the road because I'm getting caught up on other stuff, but watch out for that one. So alright guys, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.